Hey all, today we're talking about poor craftsmanship, worse customer service, and a cowardly owner. Let's get into it. Now this is one of those videos I really recommend you watch the whole thing. Everybody always says that. I feel like it's a tired phrase, but this is a video that the final climax is at the end, and I recommend you watch the whole thing to get the full perspective. But let's get into it. So today I'm talking about VZ grips. They primarily make G10 grips. They make them here in America, or so they say. That phrase will come back in a little bit. And the story revolves around basically kind of a two-part customer service issue. One is poor manufacturing, and then the other covers how the company handled that poor manufacturing problem. But anyway, long story short, so I was looking for a set of grips for my 29-3 Smith & Wesson. I was looking at G10, trying to stay away from rubber because, well, frankly, it's kind of ugly. So I ended up going with VZ's Smith & Wesson end-frame square butt revolver grip, and I got it in the hyena brown. So the issue started, basically what happened was I put the grips on the gun, and I went and shot the gun for a little bit at the range, realized that they were too small for my hand, and I ended up taking them off. The too small for my hand is something that will actually come up in a little bit. As I was taking the grips off, I noticed that they had worn down to bare metal a section of my trigger guard. In the short time they were on, they had kind of rubbed down the finish down to bare metal, and I was a little annoyed by that. 29-3, these older 6-inch 44s are kind of tough to find a good one in good condition, and this one was in really good condition, still is, but I was a little annoyed that the finish had gotten rubbed off. And I started inspecting the grips and just noticed that parts of the machining weren't necessarily as clean as I would have thought if I had machined them out. So I reached out on 523, and this was what I sent to them. Basically, again, I'm not going to read them, but showed the mark and then showed the spot on the grip and just kind of said, hey, I was really kind of disappointed about this, especially since it's a vintage gun. Now I sent that on the 23rd, and then I waited till about the 28th, and I hadn't really heard anything from VZ. I went on to see that they saw that they had a phone number and decided why not give them a call. Keith is going to be the most frequently talked to person, so I'll let you know if I'm not talking about Keith, but just if I don't say anything, assume it's Keith. But anyway, so I reached out to him and on the phone, and he told me that he had seen that email and forwarded it over to the Amazon guy. I'm like, okay, cool, great, so what happens here? When I asked that, he said, well, what was going on? Could you explain it better? So I explained, what happened and everything. And he immediately comes back with, so the grips were too small and you shot them anyway? Acting like somehow, that was my fault. And I said, yes, it wasn't that they were too small off the start. I decided after putting them on the gun, they felt a little bit on the small side for my hand. But I wanted to give them a shot because, instead of just immediately dismissing this $80 pair of grips, I'll give them a thorough testing before, one, I shoot a review of them, and two, return them. Maybe I end up keeping them, right? So I explained that, and then I at least thought he kind of understood what I meant, that they weren't too small to fit on the gun, they were too small to fit my hand. And basically we talked for a little bit, and it seemed like a really decent conversation to where I was kind of hoping that, maybe we're going to get some forward motion. I again brought up, just looking for a refund, and, hey, a real nice gesture would be kicking a bluing pen or something. It's there again, they're like $10, so it's hardly a massive expense. The fact that the grips damaged the gun. So it was left that, he would look into that, and I'd hear back from him. Same day, it was decided about shipping the grips back to them directly, in the sense that they would send me a label, and then I would directly ship them back to them, so they have them in their possession and are able to get a better look at them, because if I send them back through Amazon, they're never going to get to see them. They'll just be in a pile of whatever that goes who knows where. So I said, yes, no problem. My wife was actually leaving to be out of town for a couple weeks, so I said to them, hey, as long as you can get me this label today, because this is the last day I can get to the post office, it'll be fine. It'll be great. They did that, and I sent the grips back, which I guess it should say because this spans a couple months. So now we're into June, but before then it was the end of May. But on the 3rd, that they said that they received the grips and they wanted a copy of my Amazon invoice, which I sent. I had talked to him on the phone. It seemed pleasant, but he did. The only thing that I guess kind of left me a little bit surprised was they said how basically when they make the grips, they fit them to their gun and then ship them out. And then they get people that will, oh, it doesn't fit my gun. And as far as they're concerned, if the grips come back and they still fit onto their test gun, then it's not really a problem. And in fact, it's reflected that the same thing on their website. That basically they don't consider a defective product if it still fits onto their gun. So, it doesn't matter that, hundreds of thousands of frames in the same size have been produced. Maybe, the spec has ever so slightly changed, throughout the years, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or more years. As long as it fits on their gun, they don't consider it defective. I reached out to them on the 8th of June and I said, hey, it's been about a week. Just wanted to reach out and see where we were at. He then responded on the 9th that that person that handles checks has been on vacation. He'll be back in the office tomorrow. I would do my best to get a check out. Now, here's where, and I'm going ahead, but I have to bring this up now because this is where it fits in the timeline. Keith sent an email to himself, apparently, I guess a day or two later, that was meant to be sent to me, saying about trying to do PayPal, which I, of course, did not get this email, so I had no way of knowing he was trying to get a hold of me or anything like that. I'm just expecting that, per his last email to me and his word, that I was going to get a check mailed out and it'd be fine. So on the 17th, I sent out an email on basically saying, keep an eye out for it. I still haven't received anything yet, which is my way of saying, like, what the hell? Where's this check? It's been over a week. On a side note, any word on any kind of cold blue solution for the damage to my 29-3? Now, when I spoke with him on the phone, of course, he gave all lawyers answers of, maybe, possibly, don't know, possibility, we'll see what we can do. Again, not confirming or denying anything. So I, was still under the impression that this was a possibility. Here's $10 to go get a bluing pen. We're sorry that happened. So he responded the next day on the 18th of June, basically asking me about PayPal. And I thought that was kind of odd because, again, supposedly this check had been mailed a while ago. So I don't know why you're asking me about PayPal. But this is when he says that there won't be a solution for the cold blue. Now, by this point, I'm starting to be a little bit annoyed because it's been kind of a while now and I still don't have my refund. And if I just sent them back to Amazon, I would have had my refund, basically next day or same day. So I responded back when they said about that. I basically just said that, I'm unsure what's up with my PayPal. I haven't used it. And, I'm just wondering why you're asking that because, hey, if you sent out a check weeks ago, what's the big deal? And then I went into the cold blue thing, and again, I'm kind of irritated. It's been quite a while. I've been waiting for this check. They've had the grips now since the 3rd, and it's the 18th, and I'm still, still without my money. So he responds back on the 18th again, saying, I explained to you the person that wrote the checks was out of town. Now, if we go back, he tells me that the person that's been on vacation is coming back on. This is sent the 9th, so assuming it's the 10th now, right? That this guy's back. That still gives a full 8 days for them to have mailed the check. So I don't know why he's bringing this up. And this is again where I'm really starting to notice that there's a bit of an attitude problem with Keith. He expressed that PayPal would be easier, so forth and so on. But then at the end, he says, unfortunately, I do not see us being responsible for having your gun repaired. At this point, I'm now pretty much annoyed because, again, you're basically having an attitude with me because after, basically 2 or 3 weeks, I'm wondering where my check is, and you're acting like, you told me that the guy was out of town, but you didn't mention that before. You said you were going to send the check, and then after I asked about it, you told me that he was out of town, but he was going to be back the next day, which again, that gives 8 days, which you could have mailed this check. So I end up calling, and of course I got Keith again, and I said, hey, I'm just trying to understand what's going on here because, this has been going on now for quite a while. I could have just sent these back to Amazon and not had this issue. What's the deal? At which point he then realizes, after we go back and forth, because he's like, I sent you an email on the 12th or 13th or whatever. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And then he goes and looks and realizes that he sent it to himself. So I never got the email. He never followed up with the email. So at this point, I asked to basically speak to somebody in charge because this is getting ridiculous. And obviously, Keith here has an attitude problem, and I'm not going to get any kind of resolution with someone with an attitude problem. I want to stop here and say that if you keep seeing me go up and down, it's because the chair is broken when we move. The movers broke the chair, and it slowly goes down. But yeah, we're working with it. So anyway, I wanted to speak to somebody in charge, which ended up being this John guy, John Van Zuck. He'll come in a little bit later. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name. I don't really care. But anyway, he told me that that's the person in charge, and he's not really there much, and oh, he can be tough to get a hold of. He's always busy. Basically, your classic gatekeeping. So I said, well, I want to get this resolved. This has been going on now for a while. I was just looking for a bluing pen. It's going to be like $10. And he's like, okay, fine. Send me a link to what you're wanting. And if you want to really get a hold of John, the best way to get a hold of John is to send an email, and John gets the emails that I get, so he'll see it. And at that point, I kind of typed out a long thing to John. This company's motto is the finest gun grips on the planet. And, for one reason or another, that my gun's now damaged. And all I'm asking for, even though it's been about a month of me waiting for my refund, is a $15 cold blue pen so I can fix the spot on the gun. And I offered my phone number up, basically being like, you know what, if this is something you really can't do, I'd love to hear the reasoning behind it. I'd love to hear, reasoning behind what's really going on here with my, refund. Here's my number. So John responds, and well, we're going to get into that bit that I was talking about before, where you really want to watch the whole thing because it gets interesting. Yeah. So this email I will kind of read part for part because we're going to break it down and kind of do some fact checking on John's email. And yeah. So to recap, I've been waiting almost a month now for my refund. I originally reached out on 5/23, and if I look down, it's because of the iPad. I originally reached out to them on 5/23, and it's now 6/18. So again, we've really covered a lot of time here, of which they could have refunded me. Again, this is John Van Zuck, who ends up being the president of the company. Thank you for using our product. My customer service team has been going out of their way to accommodate you in every aspect of your return. But after almost a month, I'm not refunded. An Amazon order should be shipped back to Amazon. We went out of the way for you to return directly to us. I returned directly to you because you asked me to, and I still haven't got my refund. We offered a refund. You had two options. You chose the slowest option. I chose the option, which was get a check mailed to me over a month ago, or almost a month ago, and I still don't have my refund. My customer service employees took all calls from you to discuss options and your concerns. Did their job? Well, bravo. Bravo for doing their job. You know what? I'm so glad that they're doing the job they're getting paid for. And also, as far as answering my questions or concerns, my concerns is it's been a month and I haven't been refunded. After installing the grips, you noticed they were too small for your liking, but shot the firearm anyway. And? Like, and? I mean, put down below what you think that's supposed to have to do with the relevance of the story. G10 grips will leave a mark on blued guns, even the guns we produce OEM for. The blemish on your firearm is a result of you installing the grips on it, so you say. We are not responsible for any marks on your firearm that you worked on. Even wood ones leave a wear. We will not be sending you a bluing pen. How do I explain this? Between my wife and I, we have a lot of guns. Like a number of guns that I don't want to scare the general public. I frequently take off grips to oil and stuff because a lot of stuff is just kind of sitting stored. And there's no wear marks on anything. This gun itself, I took the grips that have been on it since like 1985 off, and guess what? There's a few little rub marks, but there was no like worn down the bare metal spot on this gun. So for him to say that their OEM grips damage guns, well, I mean, that seems to me like a problem. My favorite part of that is the "so you say." So I say that that mark. You tell me they're side by side. Is that mark from that grip? And then finally, a check has been cut for your refund and you will be mailed out tomorrow. That is the only accurate statement in the whole email. Because they did actually end up mailing the check the next day. We have gone above and beyond our due diligence to appease you. There are some people you just can't please. You've gone above and beyond your due diligence, but I'm still not refunded. This is when it all kind of becomes apparent that kind of the things that me and Keith had discussed earlier, the grips being too small and, different things as far as like the issue with the check and everything being mailed out because their guy was working nights. It all kind of became apparent that despite me trying to correct him in those instances, explaining different things, he just went on listening to his own rambling. Basically, I'm the problem. How dare I buy your product? How dare I put it on my gun? How dare I shoot my gun with your product on it? It's your fault that the grips damaged the gun. It's your fault you haven't been refunded. To say that I was annoyed was a little bit of an understatement. I was I was rather cross, you might say. So I responded, and I basically just rebutted every single thing, you know, piece for piece for piece for piece, because I had actually before that, I did call, and I once again got Keith, and I said, yeah, I'm going to need to speak to this John guy. And oh, he's not available, again, the usual gatekeeping. And I went through the email with Keith, and I'm like, Keith, could you explain to me why he's under the impressions? Oh, I don't know. Oh, the best thing to do would just be to email him. And I already did email, and I'm like, this is a response. I'm like, I want a resolution on this. So of course Keith is, won't do anything, can't give me anything, and oh, don't worry, he'll say something to him, but yeah, I can't get a hold of him. So that's when I type out this email, basically saying, seems you're under some misinformation. Let's set the record straight for everybody. You'll never guess. He never responded back. So I gave it a couple days, and again, I wanted to confirm that this check was actually in the mail because I received no tracking. And I called back after a couple days, and I'm like, okay, I want to speak to John. And I don't remember the guy's name, but he was also of the same mentality as Keith. I got someone and I said, hey, looking for John. Oh, what's this about? Oh, just, we were corresponding via email. And I didn't say he was a total prick. I figured I'd save that for later. And, I said I was just looking to get a hold of him, gave my name and everything. And he was very thorough about asking all my information, and I got put on hold for just long enough that it would take someone to go walk into somebody's office. Oh, are you here about this? Nope, no, I'm not. Don't tell him to go away. And then walk back and be like, oh, sorry, he's not available right now. And I'm like, okay, cool. When would he be available? What would be a good time for him? Well, he's not going to be available. This is when the other shoe drops and it becomes apparent that it's not so much that Keith has been giving bad information, that this is a top down problem. And I said, oh, and why is that? Well, he's just not going to be available. It became more apparent that John was the person I really needed to talk to because if he's the owner of the company, he can give me the real answers of what's going on here, and maybe we can better understand the situation I've been dealing with for the last month. So I asked, hey, would it help if I start calling, every day or so and try and get a hold of him since it seems like, as I've been told, he's kind of in and out and quite difficult to get a hold of. At which point, the person responded with, well, you can try that, but it wouldn't go well for you. Now, I asked for clarification, but, well, like most telephone tough guys, they don't ever have an explanation about what that was supposed to mean. I guess it just meant that, well, I wouldn't be able to get a hold of him. And basically, we went back and forth, and I started being like, well, hey, you've supposedly mailed this check. Is there tracking? Oh no, they don't put tracking. So at this point, I hear someone in the background, and I'm like, oh, who's that? Oh, it's Keith, the guy says. I'm like, well, let me talk to Keith, because Keith has been the person that I've really talked with this whole time. And it's now become apparent that he's been giving bad information to this John guy. So I was looking forward to talking to him. So I say, let me talk to Keith. And in the background, you hear, I don't want to talk to him. So I get put on hold. Guess who gets put on is no other than Keith. I'm like, hey, Keith, how's it going? I'm really just trying to understand why, all this misinformation and why, basically I've been given the runaround all this time, and I'm just looking for my money back. And he starts screaming and whatever. You can tell he's pissed that he had to pick up the phone, but he proceeds to get louder and louder, basically saying that the same things was that you put him on the gun, you shot the gun, which again doesn't matter. Like putting something on a gun If you put something on a gun and immediately damages the gun, it's not the gun's fault. It's not the shooter's fault. And if it was, especially if it was installed properly, which it was, because they go on with one screw. There's only one way to put the grips on. There's no way to screw that up. But I then bring up to him how, I've seen VZ's quality control in the past, and there is a couple grips I have that I've noticed some poor machining. One of which my King Cobra, which I may do a review with those grips in the future, and I'll show the issue. But long story short, on the outside of the grip on the one side, it almost looks like there was some chattering with the piece as it was moving around, and it's cosmetic, it's no big deal, but you can see that it kind of like bumped along as it went down and made the pass. And he starts screaming at me that I told you those grips we only put on our website that they fit for the King Cobra, or they fit for the Cobra, not the King Cobra. And he's just going on, I don't know why you keep saying this. And I said to him, like, you're right, sir. And I said that like 8 times, and he just kept screaming over me. And I said, you're right. It does say on your website that the grips only fit the Cobra and they don't mention the King Cobra. But machining on the outside of the grip is not affected by what gun they're on. It looks like hell even if they're off the gun. So before that, and we're coming to the climax, I at one point, I asked him, I'm like, do you shoot guns? Because I didn't know, because again, he didn't seem to know much about revolvers, so I wondered if he shot guns, because it really seems like the things he was talking about, as far as the grip being too small for my hand being the reason why they damaged the gun, I was just curious. So his response was, no, no, he just sits around all day and twiddles his thumbs. You know, he just walked right into it. Like, he held the door open, he walked into this, and he was standing there holding the door open like, come on in, brother. So at which point, after he said he twiddles his thumbs all day, I said, well, after waiting for a refund for about a month, I can believe that. Anyway, while he's screaming at me about how he told me about the Cobra grip, John picks up the phone. And I was so excited to speak to this John person, and he's like, oh, this is John. I'm like, hey, John, how's it going? I'd like to go over your email because it really seems like you have a lot of bad information. And perhaps if we go over your email, and keep in mind he's talking over me the whole time, maybe we can get a resolution here. I'm really just looking for my refund. And, it's been a month and I haven't gotten it. And he's like, do not call here again. Your check is in the mail. Ah, da, 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 da. I'm not going to talk to you. I have nothing more to say to you. Click. I got my refund finally after a month. Took over a month because I had to wait for basically the check was mailed at the 1 month period. So the takeaway for this big long ramble is this: I don't recommend VZ grips anymore. Per the president of the company, they can damage your gun. Per the Keith, if there's an issue with the grips not fitting your gun, you're on the hook for shipping and everything back. So buy them off Amazon if you're going to give them a shot, as I'd recommend. But I just can't recommend them. After that customer service experience, honestly, that's appalling. For a president of the company to leave an employee on the phone screaming at a customer and then only comes in not to hear the situation out, not to maybe find a resolution, but basically just to scream at the customer some more and then hang up. No, sorry. That's not a business I can support. I can't recommend supporting them. But put down below what you think. Have you had any customer service experience with VZ? If so, how'd it go? I did hear some stories. I put some posts up in some groups, and I did hear some stories of people having some bad experiences. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Put down below what you think, and have a good day.